Well, good afternoon, everybody on YouTube. Obviously, you can see from the title is Black Fatigue. And yeah, I've had a few thoughts on this, and of course we have many modern examples. This Shiloh woman who flipped off the Somali guy who is attracted to minors and should not be in a playground with a camera. That's one incident here we hear about. I think what people are frustrated with is this whole nonsense with fixation on the N-word, similar to naggers, the South Park reference, which is absolutely hilarious. The simple reality is white people are fed up, to put it bluntly, and fed up with being told they are the root cause of all the evils, insecurities, issues of POCs, if you want to use that term, and being constantly under attack, socially, physically, communities destroyed. It's ridiculous, things like that, right? So there's a lot of hypocrisy going on, a big double standard. It's plain, it's obvious. The West is definitely under threat from what are not my words. I've heard other people call them low IQ hordes versus the real minority, which is white European people in the world. Now, I can already hear the squeals of waycism and lots of other stuff from some of you out there, whether you are a person of color or whether you're the libtarded cuck idiot, who you're all useful idiots at this point, right? And also there's still, of course, people who don't know any black people, who don't know any good black people, and therefore they just see this on TV and they become racist or potentially very biased against people who are black. That all being said, there are statistics that do in fact support, logical reasons for white people to avoid black people. Now, it's a complicated, nuanced issue. I don't think that we should just be on one camp or the other. Ultimately, I think you have to look out for your greater family, your tribe, which is often your race. People don't like to see this. In the West especially, we have this idea of all cultures are somehow equal and can be integrated together. And this notion of a melting pot, which in reality, this whole idea of a melting pot was the early 20th century, and it was really about European cultures within America. European immigrants in sort of a European melting pot was the original idea behind this. That being said, as we take a really serious look, a nuanced look at all the reasons why we have these issues, we can honestly take a look also at the institution of slavery in America. We can look at Jim Crow. We can look at all the two-tiered forms of justice or citizenship for people who are of African ancestry, right? So, I'm not just talking from a cracker's perspective, okay? I have formally studied African American history in a university, and it was interesting classes that I took on social problems as well as African American history. And they had to sort of, first of all, I think a lot of Americans mistake the notion of what Africa is. Of course, Americans are notoriously terrible at geography and history anymore. And they forget that Africa is a very big continent with a lot of different distinct cultures, identities, value systems. Same thing with Europeans. Not all white people are the same. Europeans, again, Americans make this mistake about Europeans, and that is they assume Europe is a country, not a continent, where there are even though it's small compared to the United States, there are distinct cultures, languages, architectural styles, value systems. They do have a common thread amongst them, but they are very distinct and different. They are tribal in their own way, even now. So we forget the distinctiveness of different groups of people, the uniqueness. Now, there was something of during the time of slavery when we had enslaved Africans here in the United States. They were, in fact, having to sort of become their own melting pot. They were all under the same institution, all having their identity stripped from them, all having their families, had their families actually broken apart, right? So with their families broken apart, you can imagine there's a vehicle, a big old truck flying way too fast. Give me just a moment. So anyway, they were separated from their families. So oftentimes, even in the modern era, where the the common social problem for African American families is the father is not in the home. Well, there's a historical pattern as a result of that. You know, you're looking at families being deliberately split up by slave owners back in the day. So how do you recover from that? How do you, so there legitimately is generational trauma going on here. A culture born out of trauma and enslavement for a couple hundred years. It's not going to be something you just turn around instantly. So the value systems had to develop differently for their survival. You know, you got to steal from Whitey. You know, you got to lie to Whitey. You know, you got to get away with whatever you can. You got to use any leg up you can. And people might think that I'm overgeneralizing here, but just observe it. I've seen a video where there's a woman and her 3 young daughters, African-American woman, and her little girl is crawling under a chair and stealing a white woman's purse, and the mother's encouraging her, and they sneak out. You know, these things are very, very common. They're ever present. You know, criminality, of course, is not unique to one race or one group, but there is a disproportionate percentage of these groups in America committing these crimes. So, I'm trying to not talk your ear off too fast here, but I'm trying to get my point made. So, we have to seriously take a hard look at this. What is the reason? What are the contributing factors? The socioeconomic factors, the cultural factors, the history, the historical factors. And we also have to contrast that with the notion of, oh, is there a genetic tendency for certain types of behavior? Is culture a byproduct of genetic lineage? We know that traits are passed down. We know this. We could see this with our domesticated animals, for instance. We could see this with other human beings, certain patterns of behavior, certain thoughts. We are still animals to a certain extent. Now, that being said, this makes people uncomfortable when you discuss, okay, we have social reasons why black people their behavior could be terrible now in the United States. And why that is so, and why we're so tired of it as white people in the United States. And we could say, okay, there's slavery, there's Jim Crow, there's all these factors, the civil rights era where people had their rights suppressed, okay? Fair points to be made there. But that does not explain why so many of the immigrants now who go into much of Europe commit the same, if not more heinous behaviors, right? It seems like this particular demographic, and just as a casual observer, that no matter where they go, this behavior persists. It exists. You know, from Haiti to different regions of Africa, to London, to Ireland, to Germany, to France, to Sweden. Now we have usually specific types of African groups in those areas, okay? There's usually specific ones. But yeah, it's a noticeable pattern. It's a very in-your-face pattern here that cannot be ignored. So the challenge really is for and I'm speaking of for African Americans here. You know, I saw a video, good video, and I'm sorry I don't remember the name off the top of my head. Young black woman, American woman, and I'm paraphrasing her. She was explaining why white people are sick and tired of them, and she really nailed it perfectly well. She talked about how the black community, collectively as a whole, tends to prop up the most degenerate members of their culture and society. Tends to prop them up, defend them when they're wrong. I mean, this Carmelo Anthony guy, come on. really. There's no defending his actions. It's just ridiculous. So they'll defend the most vile members of their community. Not only defend them, but attack anybody verbally or with threats of violence and etc. who goes against their narrative. So the challenge is for this community to, the members of the community who are doing the right thing seem to be outnumbered or have a suppressed voice in all this. So it is really up to this black community themselves to change this. They have to take control of their communities. They have to become the face of their communities. They cannot let the thugs become the face. Well, they have been. The thugs have been the face of their community for a long time. So white people are increasingly associating them with those communities, with the negative aspects of those communities. So there's a lot of other nuanced questions to ask in this, and that is, how is criminality expressed differently via racial groups or subgroups, cultural identities? I think that's a fascinating study. I'm sure there's some good scholarly studies out there on the subject. But ultimately, it's not up to us. Now, for white people, though, fed up with the criminality, the blame, the accusations of racism every time you disagree with a position. It's this tired and worn out ad hominem / straw man attack on everything. And tired of being put into a box where we're at fault for everything that is beyond our control. Tired of our culture being blackwashed. Tired of commercials where you see somebody black-splaining to white people. Tired of the strong and empowered black woman taking every role, whether it's fantasy, whether it's fairy tales. By the way, fairy tales, for those of you who are pagan, you might know that they are sort of a coded expression of earlier European values and traditions when they were oppressed by Christianity in the Middle Ages, okay? So these things, like Snow White's a great example. A character originally from what would be the border of Poland and Germany, named Snow White because of how white her skin was. Well, that's taboo, that's bad. Let's get this angry, ugly, feminist Hispanic woman to play her and insult those who value this old story, right? That's one example of many. I mean, come on. Heimdall in the Norse mythology, the whitest god, played by Idris Elba, you know? I mean, I like Idris Elba's acting. I think he's a great actor, but shit, you literally went out of your way to take the whitest god and make him black. There's so many examples, ridiculous. I think there was that stupid Viking series, which by the way sucks for all those out there. It's all full of shit. But there was a sequel on the Viking series. I think it was Jarl Håkon, a historical figure, being played by a black woman. It's just fucking over the top. And people say, oh, it's racist to see that difference. No, bullshit. It's racist. It is racist against white people. It is racism against white people. It's an attempt to culturally genocide white people, to subvert their history, their experiences, their identity, and say you have nothing that is yours. And in fact, you can hear that from some people in academia say white people have no culture. It's like, are you serious? You have no idea. The ancient world, the modern world, civilizations built, rose, the technological world, those are white culture, you know? And of course somebody's gonna say, well, this one black dude helped, you know, build a fucking component for a cell phone. Okay, might have contributed. Did so within white societies with white education, okay? Let's not forget there's some cultures that never discovered how to use a wheel, okay? I mean, so we have to look at these things honestly and plainly. Is it good to, you know, and I don't agree with the notion that this is all some sort of elaborate government psyop to get two groups hating each other. I think that's ridiculous. I think BLM might have been. I don't think it was organic. I think there are people who try to subvert our rule of law on purpose, and they'll take an entire demographic, do the haves and have-nots, the whole Marxist trick, and turn them into a bunch of useful idiots. We saw them burn down cities in those, mostly peaceful protests. However, this is different. These are These are white people who are saying, we're not putting up with this anymore. It's unacceptable. You're not going to harass us, steal from us, attack us, and then get away with it and not be called out for it. This is where the gloves are starting to come off. And it's, you know, white people still outnumber everybody in this country, in this culture. So these threats that some people make towards white people are not wise. It's not going to work out for you in the long run if more and more white people wake up to this. Not a positive thing, by no means. Well, it is positive that white people can re-engage with their tribal and historical identity and be proud of who they are. That's perfectly fine. But battling it out, we're all just, you know, regardless of what race you are, what culture you're from, we're all just trying to go to work, right? We're all just trying to provide for our families. We're all trying to get by in this society. It's very easy to scapegoat other groups. When you take away the nuances that have people acting the way they do. The behaviors, though, from the black community cannot be rewarded or encouraged. They have been by the traitors within our own state, within our leadership systems. Why that is, that's a good question for another time. I think there are groups of people in the world historically who have found that Native Europeans make terrible slaves, that we have a habit of rising up and overcoming and crushing those who try to do so to us. That's a historical reality. We have repelled hordes and hordes of those who hate us for being who we are, historically, over and over and over again. So you can think one thing about the group. You know, you can separate yourselves into a little box, into little groups. It's good to have tribal family pride in who you are and what your ancestors, your extended family has accomplished. However, we don't have to hate, threaten, harm each other over the idea. It's a little absurd to me. It's a waste of time. But identity politics, while I and many others like me would say, hey, don't like identity politics, the reality is identity politics have been forced upon all of us. Identity politics, the worst kind, have been forced upon white people for the last like 50 to 60 years easily. So, yes, black fatigue is real. People are sick of the bullshit, and they're not going to sit down and be quiet no more. They might call you some racial slurs. Me personally, I think some racial slurs are hilarious. You know, of all groups. I think all groups make. I love the 80s truly tasteless jokes, all the racial slurs. I loved reading that shit as a 12-year-old. Excuse me. I still like some things. I like cracker. I like mayo monkey. I think that's fucking great. That's hilarious. So we got to learn to laugh at each other, lighten up a little bit, and realize who's pulling the strings here, okay? So, that being said, got a damn drone flying overhead. Fuck those bastards. I'll see you guys next time. Bye.